More than 2 million people have fled Ukraine in the last 12 days since Russia first invaded. You have over 30 years of humanitarian experience. Talk about what concerns you most about the situation on the ground that we're seeing.
This is our worst and most nightmarish scenario. I was myself in Ukraine just 2 weeks before the invasion. And of course, what I saw there was a conflict-weary population in the east of Ukraine, where there was an active conflict line through Donetsk and Luhansk departments of Ukraine already. Now, 2 million refugees, we've never seen that number before in recent memory from any country in the course of less than 2 weeks. There must be another 2 million on their way. It could be 5, 6, 7, 8 million coming west. There are also an unknown number of people fleeing into Russia from the east. So Europe is bracing for a long-term, enormous catastrophe, and we're scaling up like never before. Even my own organization launched our regional response plan today. We're going to help 800,000 Ukrainians inside Ukraine and in neighboring countries. Many others are doing the same.
Jan, can you speak a little bit more about that? We were just talking with our reporter, specifically here in the U.S., how lawmakers are trying to get $12 billion in aid to Ukrainians in and around the country. How is your organization working with governments like the U.S. and others to make sure that aid is getting to the right people?
Well, we will be among those through our office in Washington, D.C. that will apply for some of that funding. We're getting money from the Norwegian government. We're getting from the Norwegian public. Europeans are giving privately like never before. We're really shocked of this catastrophe in the heart of Europe. This will be an operation coordinated with the United Nations system, with the Red Cross system. A lot of aid is being mobilized already in the neighboring countries. The refugees are well received in Poland, in Romania, in Hungary, in Moldova, Slovakia, where they initially come. Later on, they will also go to other countries. The first few hundred have come all the way up here to Norway. But the main needs will remain in Ukraine. So we will be tested like never before in having an operation in a war zone, because this senseless conflict is not ending. It's being built day by day, and the war has been taken into densely populated areas. So we need to come to the relief of those who are displaced and war victims inside Ukraine.
And just this morning, Jan, there's a lot of conflicting reports about whether there is or isn't a ceasefire, if Ukrainians are being able to be evacuated safely. From your sources on the ground, your team on the ground, what are you hearing about this? Are people being able to evacuate the country?
Not in some of these worst places like Mariupol in the south, etc. There has not been the humanitarian corridors, so-called, that should be established, have not come. Of course, in many other areas, the people are not encircled. They can flee and are fleeing. I've been working for many years in conflict zones, both for the Norwegian Refugee Council and for the United Nations. A lot of that time also with Syria. A humanitarian corridor is not a corridor. It's basically a crude agreement to not have fighting along a certain route from A to B during a certain time. They haven't been able to establish that, which shows how the distrust between the parties has been built and how little they are able to order the local commanders to really keep the initial agreements about those evacuation routes that are badly needed, because hundreds and hundreds of thousands of civilians are now in crossfire.
Do you suspect, what do you suspect over the next few days that we're going to see?
What we're going to see is that more and more of the country will be engulfed in fighting. Kiev is a big place. I mean, 3.5 million people. Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in the north, very close to Russia, another 1.5 million. Probably Odessa, which is the iconic seaport to the south, will also be seeing fighting. So this, we cannot give up hope that there would be a minimum of sanity still in Europe and in the Kremlin, so that this offensive can stop.
Do you think it's too late for diplomacy, Jan?
No, it's not. It's not. It's never too late. But for each day that goes, the bitterness would grow, the more entrenched the parties will be, and the less common ground there will be. So what we're appealing to all countries is to, reboot diplomacy and to get talks going, because it's not men who are sitting in safe offices in Kremlin and elsewhere who pay the price for this. It's the elderly, it's the disabled, it's the families with children that I met very recently in Ukraine just before the invasion.
Right, and I know you and your team have said Ukraine has one of the oldest humanitarian populations and crises that's going on right now. Jan, just finally, when we talk about talks and we talk about diplomacy, there's also a lot of talk about potential war crimes. Russia and Putin potentially being charged for war crimes. Do you think it is too early to be talking about that, or do you have maybe some insight into potentially what is going on there?
Well, there should be justice and accountability for shelling of civilian targets, for killing of civilians. But at the moment, what we're seeing is that the war is entering into densely populated area where there should be no war, really. And it will get much, much worse. It's hard to get accountability for crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity. But there should one day be. The best way of avoiding a contentious debate about that is to stop the war now, stop the offensive military operations.